It's time. Time to repair. Time to restore. Time to revive. It's time for the Cure National Policy Summit 2017.
What I'm going to do now is just give an introduction to both of our guests tonight. This is meant to be a roundtable discussion. Y'all are at half rounds. That's great. But we want it to be interactive. We want it to be discussion. We want you to hear some of the things that they're going to be talking about. So to begin that, I'm just going to get through the formalities now, and then each one of them will come up. I'm going to have Dr. Charmaine Yoest come up first. Chuck Donovan will come up. They'll both share some snippets, and then we're going to jump right into the conversation and discussion. Is that good? Now, Dr. Charmaine Yoest is Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs at HHS, where she provides executive leadership, policy direction, and management strategy for the Department of Public Affairs programs and activities. Dr. Yoest advises the Secretary, advises the Secretary and Deputy Secretary, I believe, and other HHS leadership, as well as White House officials on major departmental and administrative issues. I think I got that completely wrong, but Charmaine is so forgiving and gracious. Charmaine Yoest is an author, a writer, a spokesperson with extensive experience in public policy. She began her career in working on the West Wing of the White House for the Reagan administration, and later served as senior advisor to Governor Huckabee's 2008 presidential campaign. Most recently, she was a senior fellow at American Values and had previously served as president and CEO of Americans United for Life. She's a phenomenal woman. She has been a go-getter, a Trojan horse, so to speak, in the life field and on these issues, but I will stick with her current titles at HHS, and we so applaud her coming. And let me tell you about Chuck Donovan too, because I'm just going to do them both at the same time. Sorry. And Chuck Donovan is president of the Charlotte Lozier Institute. He served as legislative director for the National Right to Life Committee more than 3 decades ago, worked as a writer for President Reagan, helped to lead the Family Research Council for nearly 2 decades, and most recently has been senior research fellow in religion and civil society at the Heritage Foundation. Chuck has played key roles in the development of public policy regarding public financing on abortion, compassionate alternatives to abortion, the child tax credit, marriage penalty reliefs, and rights of conscience. Donovan has appeared on many different programs from national radio, television, CNN, politics, and ABC's Nightline, as well as programs on NBC, Fox, NPR, EWTN, and CBN. Both are incredible people that know this field well. We look to as real leaders that are leading in some key areas in our country. And I'm going to ask Charmaine to come just to kind of set us in the right tone. Dr. Charmaine Yoest.
Derek and Star, thank you so much for the invitation and the opportunity to be here. I'm really, really honored to be in the position I am now at HHS. It's really exciting for me to be a part of the breadth and the depth of the issues that are going on at the Department of Health and Human Services. And so I'm really pleased to have an opportunity to talk with you about that. The funny thing about being in the government now is the first day you come on board, they terrify you because everything, they say, well, you can't do this, and then the next part is, or you'll go to jail. So, sorry, I guess that wasn't as funny as... and that includes speaking engagements. So I asked if I could come when Derek very graciously asked me to come, and they said, well, you can't talk about this, and you can't talk about this, and you can't talk about this. And by the time they were done with all the can't talks about, there wasn't a whole lot left. But I basically, being somewhat stubborn, dug my heels in and said, there's no way that I'm not going to get to say hello to my friends at Cure. So I just, I'm so inspired every time I hear these words talking about the life issue in the context of what does it mean to be a person. I think some of you may know the story of how Walter Hoy and I got to be really good friends, is that we were actually kind of arguing about really the legal strategy related to how do we defend the unborn. And so we got to, arguing about the legal strategy around personhood, and we just were kind of going at each other, back and forth, back and forth. And then finally, after a while, he started to just share with me his heart on what personhood historically through the Black struggle in the United States means to him and to his family. And I've really never looked at the issue the same since that conversation. I've always felt that it's essential for us to talk more about how the pro-life struggle today stands in the civil rights tradition, and that's part of the historical foundation of what we're about today. And so I so appreciate you all being here today, standing with Star, standing with Derek, and coming to Washington and bringing that message to Inside the Beltway. Because frankly, so much of the life issue has been so politicized that we get, and people are so entrenched in their ways of thinking about the issue, and it's so deeply, deeply personal. So much pain, so much suffering, so much guilt, so much shame that's wrapped around the issue that it's really hard for people to talk about the issue anymore. It's really hard for people to step outside of their set talking points and their set knee-jerk reactions to the issue. We all just bring all this baggage to it. And so I think being able to challenge people to think about it differently, to think about it from a personhood perspective. Who do we recognize as being, of having the standing, of being an American citizen, of being a person for whom the laws apply? That's a topic we don't talk about, And so to me, that's the frontier of the pro-life movement that I see as being deeply challenging. And then I don't want to take up too much time before you and I get to talk together. The other issue that's really near and dear to my heart is how this affects women. And one of my most treasured life experiences was getting to march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge with my friends Catherine Davis and Alveda King. Star, you were there that day too. We were all together. Yeah. I just get choked up even thinking about that day, because that day was about calling to account abortionists who are abusing women across this country every day, and telling them that the destruction of a life is a way to elevate themselves and empower themselves. And they wake up on the other side of that procedure and find devastation and grief. And, as someone who spent my professional career interacting with a movement that claims to stand for women, that means everything to me, to stand up and say, no, this is a procedure that is not just destroying unborn lives, but is also destroying women's lives. So I'll stop there. And Chuck and I go back, way, way back, and it's really...
Thank you, Charmaine. Let me give you a chair right over here, if that's fine. And you can, as she's going to sit while Chuck begins his. But let me tell you quickly, did I get your title right? I know I didn't, right, Charmaine?
I think you did.
I did?
Yeah,
okay, good to go.
Doesn't really matter.
That's the kind of person she is. She is so down to earth. Many years ago when I met her, she actually, I used to tell her all the time, she was one of the nicest people that I saw in D.C. every single time. She smiled, she hugged you, she was so just very caring and dear. And I always remember that about her, because I felt like a peon sometimes in some of those meetings, and like, oh, wow. But she was just an incredible person. So, Chuck Donovan.
Thank you, Derek. Well, good evening. I want to thank Star Parker for creating another incredible event. Derek, whom I've had the pleasure of working with before, at Family Research Council. There's another Derek in the back, if I'm right, who did some incredible work with Family Research Council years ago, including one with Chuck Colson that I'll remember forever, and Derek will too, for reasons we'll let go, but it was a great event about the future of the Supreme Court. And then Charmaine. God has put Charmaine and me in the same room again for a simple reason. She can't speak about her job, but I can speak about it. So the things she can't say, Charmaine, just move your mouth, and I'll say them. So, Charmaine has been an anchor in the pro-life movement since I've been in D.C. We first worked together, I think in 1989. We were both in the Reagan White House, but I didn't know Charmaine then. But when the Family Research Council and Dr. Dobson started pulling things together, we were early hires when we were a very small enterprise. And we've kept in contact over the years, over our kids and families, and watched incredible things happen to all of them, great growth. God's blessed us in this very difficult city. And I have to say, having worked in pro-life since 1971, seen some progress, but nothing like what we wanted to have happen. It's been a very tough place to be. And not just restrictions on what you can do and say, but the resistance you get. And the worst of it, we know from Scripture, the resistance from your friend, or someone you think is your friend, from an apostle, in the case of Judas, of course, hurts more than anything, because they've been with you, they fought with you, and it still happens here. I want to start with kind of a walk on the way of the cross. I know you are very aware, I've talked to a couple of you tonight about the dire statistics. And my organization, Charlotte Lozier, does a lot of statistics. So we're going to walk on the way of the cross for a few minutes on the statistics. But then I want to talk about the end of the story, which I hope and pray and still think will be a resurrection. And hearing just fragments of Martin Luther King's speech at the Lincoln Memorial reminds us that it can happen. It may not be complete when it happens, but hearts can turn. A nation can turn. It won't be in a minute, it may not even be in a decade, but it can happen. But let me talk to you a little bit about numbers, because that's what we do. And just about 2 months ago at Charlotte Lozier, we hired 3 public health statisticians. Now that sounds like the most boring thing that ever happened. But the truth is that abortion has not been understood as basically an assault on public health. And these 3 experts are bringing a very new message, but the initial numbers were not a cause for happiness. They wrote a paper called Induced Abortion, Mortality, and the Conduct of Science. And they had to start off by making the simple point, which is not accepted in the public health world, the simple point that abortion is a death. But no one really contests that it's a death. It's a human being, unique, unrepeatable. We can tell if it's a boy or a girl. It has everything it needs to grow to the same adults that we see sitting around tables or playing bocce or whatever it is that we're going to do. At my age, I'm getting close to bocce. But it is a death. So they started in their public health service. This is a PhD, peer-reviewed article, and they said, first, we're going to establish that abortion is a death. How do we measure the impact of abortion? And I would wager that almost everybody in this room knows that the abortion rate, which would be the number of abortions for 1,000 women between ages 15 and 44, is 3 times as high for African Americans than it is for what they call the non-Hispanic white population. That's technicalese that HHS spends decades developing. But it's basically a rate of about 35.5%. I'm using a different number now, but 35.5% of all pregnancies among African Americans are ended by abortion. So the rate is 3 times as high. For Hispanics, it's in the middle, about 17%. So there are big differences in minority groups. We can get into the reasons why for that in a little bit. But that's not the only way you can measure it. Another way to measure it would be take all the deaths that happen in a population from every cause, car accidents, cancer, heart disease. What do you think the number is for the percentage of all deaths among certain groups that abortion causes? Kind of took my breath away when I read this article, and I know a lot of numbers, but I didn't know these. For non-Hispanic blacks, 61.1% of all deaths in the United States are abortion. Think about that for a second. For whites, it's still high, 16.4%, 1 in every 6. But it means other things obviously are bigger causes of death. For Hispanics, actually, it's higher than for blacks, 64.4%. Bit of a trick in the numbers because mortality rates generally for blacks are higher. So for Hispanics, abortion is the leading cause of death in the United States. All right, I'm going to blow your mind away a little bit further with that because there is a statistic that is used across public health that refers to years of potential life lost. Now, that basically is a number you figure out based on the age of the person compared to life expectancy. And it's not to say, of course we don't say, that the life of an 85-year-old gentleman, I'm pretty close, is of any less value or more value than a baby a year old. But if you lose the baby, you've lost 75 to 80 years of potential life. If the older guy goes, we're a little right by that time. We should be expecting to fall from the tree. So public health people they calculate different numbers for it. So what do you think are the years of potential life lost? Of all the years of potential life lost among white Americans, the number is staggeringly high. It's 63.1% because abortion kills a baby. Takes away the entire span of a lifetime. Among non-Hispanic blacks, 86.5% of all years of life lost are lost due to deaths in abortion. And these public health researchers went on, and actually the number is pretty staggering for Hispanics too, 87%. Now, do we know this in the United States? Do we know the staggering cost of abortion, really? I'm not sure that we do. When Jesus was walking on the way of the cross, you remember, he came across a group of women who approached him, and they're seeing that he is being tortured on the way to the cross, and they're weeping. You remember what he says to them? It says, he said to them, "Weep not for me, weep for yourselves and for your children. Because behold, a time is coming when men will say, blessed are the barren, the wombs that never bore, the breasts that never nursed." If they do these things, these are concluding words to these women, if they do these things in the case of the green wood, what will they do in the case of the dry? Now, I puzzled over that short sermon, but it is so powerful. But our Lord was predicting, I think, the time when we would become so lost, so separated from him, that women would say, or our society would say, better not to have born children, better never to have nursed. And we are doing it in the green wood. What is the green wood? We're in the wealthiest nation that has ever been. The wealthiest nation that has ever been. And we are taking the lives of our children in massive numbers because someone says, no, the world can't support it, population, bigotry, whatever it may be. And I think as mercifully as our Lord looks upon us in our dire straits, that mercy must be tempered with a justice that says, I gave you so much. How did it turn out like this in the blessed America that you live in? So that's a bit of the walk on the way. What is the chance for a Sunday, a resurrection to happen on this issue? Well, the woman next to me is part of that. She may not be able to speak, but she is in that federal agency at this time in history, ready and willing and able to fight for the unborn and to be a voice for the vulnerable and the weak. And there are dozens more like her throughout the government. I'm wary enough that I'm not going to name all of them, And I'm not wary enough not to say they're up against, even now, resistance within the new administration. I mean, less than 1% of the government changes when we change governments. People hold positions, the agencies, the laws. There's an awful lot of drag there. But we do have a justice on the Supreme Court, Neil Gorsuch, who's written one book. Like me, I wrote one book. It was about Planned Parenthood. His one book is about assisted suicide and euthanasia and what's wrong with it. It's fantastic. I think he will be as big a champion for the justice of the law about the right to life as anybody that served on the court. He's also very persuasive, kind person. We may have a chance in a couple of years to put a couple more like him on the court. If that happens, then what we hope and pray for, which would be a reversal of that Roe decision, which took a whole class of humanity. With Dred Scott in the 19th century, that class of humanity was here, struggling, recognizable, and the court said, we're not going to grant you these rights. In Roe, they took a class of humanity and took rights away, because in most states at the time of Roe, the unborn child was protected. But other than that, these decisions are the same. We may have the chance for that to change, but we're going to have to fight tooth and nail. We're going to have to take successes where they come. We're going to have to pick ourselves up when they don't, like the Hyde Amendment in health insurance. We had in the bill that went down in flames earlier today a very pro-life, pro-protection of the unborn document. That has been consistent. It's not going to become law in the short run. We have Planned Parenthood defunded, Planned Parenthood, which I think the evidence is overwhelming where they've located their clinics. Someone needs to ask them, if 35% of the abortions in the United States are performed on African Americans, what percentage of your 330,000 abortions are? I can tell you with a pretty high degree of statistical confidence that it's higher than that. Charlotte Lozier Institute's just finished looking at 22 states, and the Planned Parenthood share of the entire abortion market in those states ranges up to 97%. Do Americans know this? Do they know why we're fighting with this organization, which is supposed to be about family planning, not family destruction? I don't think they know it. So they will not be defunded now. We'll pick ourselves up and keep the fight going. There are conscience bills pending so that your doctor and my doctor, my wife a nurse, they don't have to participate in abortions or lose their health insurance because California says they have to have it, cover abortion. And all I can say is the inspiration I get daily from other causes that I've seen fought and won, particularly Dr. King's cause, is that you never give up until justice and righteousness flow down like the waters. And when they flow down like that, they're coming from the hand of God himself. So he has his time and his place and his way where he will consign Roe v. Wade to the dustbin of history. We have to be along with him on that way of the cross until that resurrection comes when we can say, no life, no child, no boy or girl in America is devalued because they reside in the womb. So thank you very much.
So he doesn't have to stand. So, this is a roundtable discussion. Anybody got questions about life? And I will say we will defer some questions to Charles Donovan, and anything that Charmaine can't answer, she will. Now, I know I have activists in the room, I have pastors in the room, I have people that care about life deeply. This is a great time to ask questions. I can come up with plenty. Yes, sir.
In your opinion, what are some practical ways that clergy and pastors can practically assist in fighting abortion and ways we can become more actively involved in it?
Oh, we did not give you this.
I have a lot of thoughts about this. Going back to my point about how politicized the issue is, I think that a lot of clergy see the issue as being political, and they miss the spiritual dimension. And so they feel like they can't talk about it without being political. And yet I think that I wrote a whole piece one time about the church and abortion, and going back to what I was saying earlier about how women wake up from the procedure, and to me, one of the things that is most striking to me is the stories that you read of women who talk about how they felt desperate to get an abortion, and they wake up in grief. And you have to stop and think, what happened? Like, and you know, why 1 minute you're desperate to get an abortion and you're regretting it instantly thereafter. And I want to challenge pastors out there to ask that question, because we skip over the fact that the woman experienced a real death. She experienced the real death of a person. And as Christians and as a pastor, that's something that you need to speak into to help the woman and the father of the child as well. So many times the man is left out of this whole entire equation. He's been written out legally, but spiritually we shouldn't be leaving him on the sidelines. So I think that if pastors would really grapple with helping people address the spiritual side of this, that would make a tremendous difference.
Okay, I think I have it there. I would just like to ask the panelists, can you speak to this, and if there is fact and truth to it, that when we talk about abortions, that we're talking about more than just the abortion. We are talking about the mental as well as the physical health of the mother. And I would like for you to address that, which furthers the healthcare issue that it appears to be genocide, particularly in the black community.
I'll start with a very short commercial. We have a website called lozierinstitute.org, and we do have a lot of information in there on the physical and mental health consequences of abortion. Charmaine has alluded to that. We do have a poor system for identifying those things, so they don't necessarily show up in all the data. And one of the things we struggle with, and I think it has pastoral implications too, is there's a dominant, and by being opposed to abortion, in a sense, we almost necessarily contribute to it, though we don't wish to, but there's still a shame about the issue. So women who are physically harmed in abortion tend not to sue the person who did it. Perhaps the same with sexual assault, because to go through the process of the litigation and all that. And it may be in the pastoral sense too, feeling free to bring an issue to a pastor, or bringing it to Christ through the pastor, and seeking forgiveness and knowing that there's a certitude to that it will come. I think it's also a dynamic, and I'm not a pastor, so you can strike me down for speaking too strongly about it, but it's in all the research that we do on marketing for pregnancy centers, for focus groups with people who are conflicted about abortion. Driver number 1 and 2 for women making decisions for abortion is not a deformity in the baby. It's not that they were assaulted. These are 1 or 2% of the cases. The number 1 and number 2 are feeling economically stressed, and also the support of the boyfriend. Now, to me, I'm not saying that families don't have 2 wage earners. They often do now, but I see them as conjoined. The issue is who closest to me is going to support me in doing the thing I'd really would prefer to do. And I think it's speculation, but I think 90 to 95% of women are not radical feminists in that sense. They would like to carry that baby to term if they could see the way. And there's a researcher named Paul Swope who concluded that many women see 2 deaths pending, their own aspirations, hopes, and dreams if they don't abort, and then the baby's life. And they're choosing for their ability to go on. Now, who makes the biggest difference in that world? It's not the law, and I favor pro-life laws, strong ones. because I think the abortionist is an evil person and needs to not be in business. I also favor pregnancy centers, which need to come around. But the first person who's likely going to be the reference point is that man. We have got to build up men. Got to build them up. We are capable of so much more than macho displays and carrying weapons around, putting hoods, black or white, over our heads and demonstrating in the streets. Men can do a lot of things. There's a cute ad not so long ago. I can't remember. It was a computer ad, and the guy was going off to work for GE, and his crusty grandfather asked him to pick up the family. You remember this ad? The family axe, heavy thing. He couldn't do it, and the grandfather's taunting him. We don't need that kind of taunting, but we need strong men, pastoral men, to show the way. You are not dominators, but you are lifters. And God has given us strength to handle all sorts of things, and an unexpected baby is not the worst of them. They give love back. And I just say, if we can't do that, then we're not going to help solve this problem very much, because the circle of abandonment, the law, pregnancy centers, hospitals, and then people will make that impossible.
What is, I know we're in a room full of pastors and we're all believers, but what is your best argument for an atheist? What is your best argument that you would have if you're debating an atheist and you can't use any type of biblical scriptures or anything like that? What is your best argument for that?
I'm going to take a shot. You can.
I love that question, because we are so often told it's just an imposition of values, but it goes back to science. You either believe there is no debate over the fact that the fetus is alive. There wouldn't be an issue if it wasn't a life. The minute the egg and the sperm come together, you have the complete DNA necessary for a unique, irreplaceable human being. I may get this a tiny bit wrong, but work with me here. Our mutual friend Donna Halson once told me, she's an OBGYN, that science says that even before implantation, the baby starts to communicate with the mother. They can measure the life. Am I getting this right, Chuck? And it's amazing when you look at the science of the beginning of life, and it's just indisputable. So that's my argument. And then you go into that it's the government's job to protect innocent human life. That's, as a political scientist, that's something that I focus on a lot.
I think it's a variation of the same argument. If you go back unfortunately I can go way back there in the 1960s, and look about the arguments that were made for abortion, what it would do. The argument was more wanted children, more happy families, more economic progress, less child abuse, less child abandonment. Children were being saved from a fate worse than abortion. And we've had that test. 58 million lives have been taken in the service of legal abortion in the United States. And are any of those things less? Are more children born with two parents present and committed to them? Is there less child abuse? We don't read now, right, that children are abandoned? No, instead we are resorting to, I think in some desperation, drop boxes where children can be left in many states as a way to at least get away from that. We have more drug use. Is that all really being drawn because people want an experience that only drugs can give, or is it because they're missing the other experience that life and love can give? That's the end of the argument for me, is abortion loving? You can't look at the faces of women seen going into abortion clinics and see that they are feeling that they are loved and about to commit acts that are love. And finally, you begin with the idea that I can judge the value of another life. I may be someone who can limit that to the first 12 weeks of life. But the next person will say, what about 20, and do that? Or someone will say, like Peter Singer at Harvard, distinguished Ivy League law professor, we should wait a week after they're born and see how much we love them. Or we're going to go to the end of life, as 25 states did this past year, and introduce bills to help people kill themselves. It won't end. Abortion is a domino, and you can be an atheist and see that.
That's why, because I really grappled with this when I was trying to figure out my own opinion on abortion. And it's like you start moving the line. Like what's the line going to be? And for me, I finally came down to, it's got to be life, no life. And we know when life begins. It's not a debate. So for me, that makes it easy. Just hang it right there. And it's the government's job to protect life. Innocent.
Well, I can get a lot of comment on that. Star, go ahead.
Chuck and Charmaine, thank you for being here. And some of our pastors are new to this discussion outside of the political realm. So could you spend a little bit more time discussing the pregnancy care centers, what they are, what they mean, what they do? I've probably been in 300 of them now over the last few years. And what we find often are 90% of their caseload, or those that are coming in for their help, are Black, and 90% of the workers are white. And there is a disconnect in that perhaps the pastors would want to know about.
I'm glad you asked about that, Star, because pregnancy care centers today are under such attack themselves. There's such a slander campaign going on against pregnancy care centers. And to me, I think the most dramatic thing about the pregnancy care center versus the abortion facility is which one is actually offering practical help to a woman. To me, for every pregnancy center that I've ever been in, and they give you a tour, they've all got these beautiful rooms that are just chock full of supplies for the women who've come to them. Baby clothes, diapers, you name it, all beautifully organized and lined up. And it's just, to me, it is so moving to see a community coming together and saying, we're going to be here to offer you real practical help in this situation that you found yourself in. Because going to Chuck's point, the data is really clear that the majority of women come to an unexpected pregnancy looking for help with the practical situation. And so that's, to me, I tremendously admire the men and women who work in pregnancy centers.
Star, I think your point is spot on. If there's another question, but let me just briefly, because Derek and I both serve on the board of Heartbeat International. And how many pregnancy centers are associated, Derek? We're supposed to know. Quiz. I think it's over 2,000 now. Yeah, and there's some overlap. CareNet is nearly as big, so they're tremendous. But I can tell you one of the things about being in pro-life as a lobbyist or a pregnancy center volunteer going on the board, you volunteer, you're going to move up the ranks. There are openings. And the Heartbeat International Board, as long as I've been on, about 7 or 8 years, I think in that time, there have been 3 African-American board members. Not the right thing, given that it doesn't, as you say, represent the clientele in the clinic. So,
I think
but we need help. If a pastor wants to step in, you will be asked to do more than you're probably ready for.
Maybe we should go back up one step, because I don't know that everyone in the room knows exactly what a pregnancy care center is. They're in their communities around them. And so if you guys can even explain who they are, what they are, and what they do, that might allow for more discussion.
Well, there's a real movement. I mean, pregnancy care centers used to be much more bootstrap. They're frequently associated with a church. They used to be maybe in a church basement. It would be a place where a woman with an unintended pregnancy could come and try to get some help. I don't know the exact time frame, but I'd say maybe in the last decade, they've really been trying to provide more services. There's a trend towards providing sonograms for women, to have itinerant doctors come in to provide some medical exams. So there's a whole spectrum of care that you can get in a pregnancy care center, ranging from having your supply closet with the diapers and the clothing, all the way up to having a doctor on staff and sonograms and some level of medical care as well.
About a third of the centers are now considered medical centers. The next classification is resource center. A resource center will provide physical supplies, pregnancy tests, perhaps a sonogram. A full-on medical center can do prenatal care, STD testing, and there's a new phenomenon of mobile units, which are expanding what the pregnancy centers can do by going to neighborhoods where they're not ready to open a brick and mortar clinic, but they get to be known. And the main thing is they will provide cost-free assistance. It doesn't happen at Planned Parenthood. They have revenue hand over fist. Pregnancy centers, 90% volunteers. We did a study at Family Research Council a while back, which was updated 2 years later, called A Passion to Serve, which describes the centers. I think they still have copies available. If anybody wants to come through me, I can get them for you. But the Pregnancy Center Network raises amount of money equivalent to the March of Dimes. It's a really big thing, but it's kind of underwater because it doesn't take a lot of government money. There may be some Medicaid, but they don't get a lot of positive publicity for semi-political reasons. But almost in every community, there's going to be at least one or two. There's a worldwide directory at Heartbeat International. You can find out where they are. And sadly, only about half of women in the country know they exist. 93% of women know Planned Parenthood by name and where they are. We got to catch up.
One other interesting thing from the last pregnancy center that I visited, they were telling me that, not every young woman who comes in chooses life. There are young women who leave and go and get abortions. And the last pregnancy center that I visited, they were telling me that they see a lot of those young women come back to them afterward. And to me, that's really, that kind of gets you going to this point about spiritual care. Maybe there's an opportunity, if you as a pastor are not already connected with a pregnancy care center, it's not just saving the babies, but it's being there afterward when a young woman and her partner realizes they've made a mistake. There's an opportunity there to engage with that life and to offer hope and healing in that situation as well.
So, based on what you just saying, that's, with Mercy House, Nancy Acorn, where they go through the whole pregnancy, and they take care of them, and then they adopt the babies out, is one of those, I guess, similar to what you're talking about. Real quickly, the word fetus is a little offensive to me, the word fetus, because it takes away, it's like a desensitizing word that takes away that it is a baby. Are you with me? Okay, good, okay. Yeah, so I don't like the word fetus. Secondly, I'm going then the abortion pill, I'm just throwing out some stuff, then you can respond. The abortion pill, which is not talked about too much besides just the Planned Parenthood, so you can make response to that. My own testimony I was born in 49, so in 1948 or so, my mother was raped, 14 years old. But she was Catholic, and she had enough belief in God that she didn't get an abortion, though she was pressured as a child too. And I thank God today that she didn't get one myself, personally. So I have invested, and it's very important to me, and I try to make myself available to the counseling and doing things to help women in that area. But the laws seem so this is my last point. The laws seem so unfair, they're not fair. When you deal with that abortionist in Philadelphia, and all the babies he killed, and it was just a horror scene. And for them to do hardly nothing to him, you know, I just have a real problem. So, fetus, abortion pills, and the unfairness of the law for those who do commit abortions and seem like nothing happens to them.
Commentary? Yep. Yes, sir. I'm coming right to you right after.
I'll try to be quick. Yeah, we don't, whenever you're talking about your sister or your brother's family, you never say, Mom has a fetus. It's a boy fetus. I mean, it's not human language. That's, doctors use it. I understand they know some Latin, but we don't use it the rest of the time. The abortion pill, really, really worrisome. It is probably more than a third of all abortions in the United States are now done by chemical. The abortion industry wants to ship it to girls and women over the mail. They may get a phone consultation or be on the computer with a doctor who won't examine her. She'll have to supposedly have gotten an ultrasound, but we did research at Lozier Institute. There are at least 85 websites out there right now that say, get the abortion pill. It's safe, 100% safe, 100% effective, and you give them cash and they mail you something. Now, we've asked the FDA. Charmaine can't talk about it. I actually can't talk about it either because I don't know what they're going to do. But we've asked them to go out and shut down as many of these websites as they can. This is not medicine to leave a woman convulsing, if you will, with a prostaglandin at 12 weeks of pregnancy with no medical support, no assurance that she has it. So, but that's where the industry wants to go because they want it to become invisible. And you know, that's when harm comes, when people become invisible, men or women. You know the novel by Ralph Ellison, The Invisible Man. If you stop seeing the suffering of a fellow human being, then you can put it out of your mind. So that's my two answers. I'm going to leave you the last one, which I can't remember. What was your third? Oh, Gosnell. Can you talk about Gosnell, Charmaine?
The thing about Kermit Gosnell, two things. One, that he didn't get nearly as much media attention as he deserved. But secondly, just I think the story that stuck out the most for me, I mean, there were a lot of gruesome details about Kermit Gosnell, but the one that troubled me the most was that he had one room for the middle-class women who came in from the suburbs to him, and then he had a filthy, dirty, unclean, horrible, blood-spattered room for the women from the inner-city neighborhoods that surrounded his clinic. And to me, that just spoke volumes about where we're at in our culture today and why I believe so firmly that abortion is a fundamental abuse of women.
Anybody know the Kermit Gosnell? Raise your hand if you don't know about Kermit Gosnell. Don't know about Kermit Gosnell. Okay, good. We're going to make sure we get some information to you on that.
He was in inner city, in Philadelphia. He had a clinic in inner city Philadelphia.
Yep. He was a doctor who actually performed abortions right in Philadelphia, right in the hood in Philadelphia. Yep, an African-American doctor. Yeah, there is a movie on Kermit Gosnell. Matter of fact, yeah, before we leave, let me show you a quick clip of this, and it will clarify the Kermit Gosnell piece real quick. He did get life in prison. Yes, sir. But
he's in prison now for infanticide.
Yeah, for infanticide, right. I think I've got Bishop Stewart, and then can I get you right after that? Okay, good to go.
I want to address this issue to pastors. I think most pastors in here are asking the question. They agree with all of this information. When you come to this meeting, you get so much information, but it's how to implement it. Now, a month ago, the Lord revealed to me how to do it. And I have been doing it every Sunday, every midweek. And I did a survey among my elders before I left home this weekend. And it's working. I'm telling the church every time I preach, I take 5 minutes or 10 minutes before I bring the message that I plan. We are involved in a national revival of prayer. Now, every pastor knows how to pray, mostly. And I said, we in this world and in our country and in our community have problems. And there's a reason for these problems. We need to pray about it, okay? They can relate to that. And then I go on to talk. I have been using Star Parker's statistics every Sunday, every midweek, Tuesday and Wednesday night, Tuesday morning, Wednesday night. And I'll share statistics like abortions, like marriage, living together without marriage. I take these statistics. And I said, these are some of the reasons why we are having challenges in our community. And there are a whole lot of things that we can put the blame on. Political parties, this party, that party. I said, but bottom line, it's spiritual. It's the enemy. I have had nobody to resist me. And then I'll share these statistics. At the time that I'm sharing these statistics, I'm talking about what you're talking about. I'm talking about abortion, killing babies, genocide. And I said, I believe these things have a direct effect on all of the negative debauchery that we see in our society. And we need to pray about it. My job is to communicate with pastors nationally to do the same thing. I call it a prayer revival. And I talk about the statistics. I pray for maybe 5 minutes, sometimes depending on how the Holy Spirit leads, a little longer. The people join me. They agree with it. It may be painful to them. In addition to that, I tell them, if you are one that have had an abortion, we love you, we receive you, we are not against you. Whether it's, I talk about fatherless children, in the last month I've talked about every issue. I do it every Sunday and every midweek Bible study. And the people receive it because I talk from the standpoint of not a political issue. It's a spiritual issue. And I said, the Bible said the thief cometh but to steal, kill, and destroy. And that's what he's doing. Let's pray against it. They pray. They stand against it. But at the same time, I'm getting the stats up. I'm talking about the issues. I think that most of these pastors in here are wondering how do I do this? And I live in California, most liberal state in the union. I have probably most of my congregation are Democrats, and some are Republicans. So I cannot get up there and say it's a Democratic problem if I want to keep half my congregation. So I don't talk about Democrats and Republicans. I talk about the facts based on the statistics, 684,740 black babies being aborted. And I said, that's part of the problem in our nation, our community, that's bringing judgment. And then I said, let's pray about it. They all join in and pray. They all join in and pray. And when I talk about a national prayer thing, I'm going to ask all of you guys to do the same thing. And after I do that, after I pray about it, then I go into my message. And it's spoken of every week.
Gotcha. Thank you, Bishop. Appreciate that. I'm going to go to you so we can keep this rolling.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I have served on the board at Charlotte Pregnancy Resource Center for over 20 years, and you're so right. It's usually one, no more than two African Americans on the board. But one of the things that pastors can do and what we do in Charlotte, at Charlotte Pregnancy Resource Center, when a young lady comes in and she's afraid, they immediately try to connect them with a church, and usually they're black females. And if she decides to keep the baby, our church, along with a few other church, most of them are not African-American churches. Within our church congregation, we find an apartment. Someone in our church has rental property. We furnish that apartment, and we walk with them. And that's what those girls need to see. That's what those girls need. And I can tell you today in our church, it's a 5-year-old that we're still walking with, 3-year-olds. And another thing with some of the girls that have had abortions, shame is a big issue. And to get them to come to church, it takes members of our church, the pregnancy resources call us and say, hey, this young lady did go ahead and have an abortion, but we need to connect her with the church. And we have members in our church, and I'm just saying, pastors, you can connect with your pregnancy resource center on so many levels, you know. But once we tell the girl, you know, not to have the abortion, we need to be able to walk with them through this thing, you know. And they need that support, and churches can do that. And that's one of the things that we've done at Victory Christian Center in Charlotte.
I got you.
My question, oh, go ahead, Star.
Just a simple line in your weekly bulletin. If you or anyone you know is struggling with a pregnancy, here is our local crisis pregnancy center. Call them. Every week.
One of the things that you'll see as far as this issue, and you'll hear about the pregnancy help centers, in the, I don't think it's on the program, but in our Catalyst magazine, every time we put out Catalyst magazine, we have an 800 number in there. So anybody struggling with this issue of an unplanned pregnancy, there's an 800 number in there. The idea is that you actually get this 800 magazine, this 800 number, and put it out. Let people know about it. The idea is that we also, right, anybody you know, the words are physically in there. And it's basically an ad, but it's one of those ads like Chuck was saying with Heartbeat International, also with CareNet, but there's a Heartbeat. One of the things about Heartbeat, and I could talk about this from being on the board with them, is that they actually have a 24/7 manned call center. And in the manned live call center with real people on the phone, multiple language actually at this point, are actually answering those calls to anybody who is going through unplanned pregnancies. They rotate around it, and I will give you the number shortly, because I do. It's 1-800 helpline, but I'll find it. I have it. We have that on, one of the people can look on our Catalyst magazine that we have, and we have that number there. You can put it on your webpage. You can put it on a bulletin board. You can put it on all your social media sites, all of these things, you can put it out there and distribute. This is a real solution aspect of trying to get this word out and to help people. Now, one of the things I'll say this, Angela Minter here is going to ask the next question. We got a few people. Let's keep it rolling, because I think a lot of people have conversation and want to hear about different points. And so freely let them get these points out, and let's keep rolling. Okay. We've got a little bit more time.
I do have a question for you guys, but I did want to say to the pastors, because our organization, Sisters for Life, we're in Kentucky, but we do sidewalk counseling. And so we really are boots on the ground, if you will. And so we're seeing your parishioners on these sidewalks, and they're coming to abortion meals. And they are actually saying what church they belong to and who their pastor is. And they're saying that they can go in there and have an abortion and come out, ask God to forgive them, and their life's going to go on. So it's good to put things in the bulletin. And I agree with all of these different ways of making sure that women know that there are other options out there. But let me say this. If a pastor's not talking about this from the pulpit, then they're going to look over that little ad and they're going to run straight to a Planned Parenthood. Because Planned Parenthood has basically come into the community as the friend of the community. And black pastors are embracing Planned Parenthood. And they're talking about Planned Parenthood and supporting Planned Parenthood. But they don't know about the pregnancy centers. So if it doesn't come from the head, from that pastor, if you don't talk about this issue, there's going to be a whole lot of blood on your hands. And for you all, many people, pastors, churches, the black community, they know about Planned Parenthood. So we need to be able to combat what Planned Parenthood is saying as the friend of the community. And so I know you mentioned something about 97% and they have about over 70% of their abortion mills in the African American community around the country. Right. But you mentioned the percentage of 97, and I thought that was something that was compelling, but I didn't get it all down.
Oh, well, we looked at 21 states. The states have pretty uneven records. And I would say it's a little bit by design. Some of them don't really want to track it. But 21 states we've been able to identify, you can tell what percentage of all the abortions in the states are being performed and by whom. And in Alaska, 97% of the abortions, of all abortions performed in Alaska, are performed by Planned Parenthood there. In Iowa, it's Indiana, 61%. Pennsylvania, it's in the mid-55 range, 55%. And the national average is probably, we've established it's 35.4% of all abortions are Planned Parenthood. So it's not a small part of their business. If you're General Motors, you control 17.5% of the US car market, and you're considered the big provider of cars. Planned Parenthood is double that share of abortion, but they want you to think that they're not. And it's one of the reasons why we gather those facts. But yes, if Planned Parenthood was defunded tomorrow, a good third of the abortion industry would be struggling immediately. And we need to provide alternatives because women will still need a place to go. And we can talk about that at more length, but we need to be in the middle of that, including with public funding. And Bishop, I just want to thank you for your words because beginning to end, it is a prayer battle. And if you get into it, you're not going to get accolades from some quarters. I earnestly believe that God is smiling on you. He said, suffer the little children to come to me. You're speaking on behalf of the smallest people on earth, the most despised in terms of how we deal with them. And I think you get nothing but grace for that, so thank you.
One thing I want to share, especially in the white community, feminism has brought about an elevation of professional and education over motherhood. And I'm thinking of a dear friend who was about to start medical school and ended up getting an abortion. And she's now in her 50s, never married, never had children, but she is a doctor. And unfortunately, that's part of what white women have bought into, is that my professionalism, my education comes way before being a mother. And I think that de-elevation of motherhood is unfortunately a very sad byproduct of the feminist movement. And I think it's very prevalent in the white community, as much as probably more so than the black community.
Praise the Lord. Shalom. I am here as a manifestation of Proverbs 3:5. I was coming back from Indianapolis yesterday from my Purdue, and Pastor Rivers happened to sit beside him, and he informed me of this conference. So I want to thank you, thank the Lord for this is powerful. And then I want to thank Chuck Donovan. 20 years ago, Chuck helped. This is manifestation of Chuck Donovan's help when he was at FRC, Alpha and Omega Network of Ministries, which was inspired by Focus on the Family because there was no voice for the black families. There was no voice in terms of abortion, anti-abortion messages, same-sex. There was no voice. Morals. Derek, people weren't talking about virtues. When I was youth pastor in Southeast D.C., we did a True Love Wait dinner, abstinence. And the response was, black kids they don't know anything about abstinence. But thanks to FRC, we sponsored this. There's a problem, there's a crisis in our community. There's a moral crisis. In 1940, 15%, talking about statistics, of children born outside of non-white marriages. In 1960s, 23%. You know what it is today? Over 73, maybe 79%. So marriage is a problem in the black community, in the African American community. Pastors, we must promote the sanctity of marriage. We must. It's absolutely necessary. We have more babies, daddies than since slavery. My wife and I go into the public housing communities and we see what's going on.
We have it's called a Royal Virtues Posse. We're promoting virtues in hotspot communities, dysfunctional communities. Women, we have parent support systems. Most of those women said that they were abused as girls. We have a serious case of mistaken identity in America, and especially in the African American community. So my question is this. In terms of abortions and non-married couples, what is the correlation? Is there a direct correlation? Has it been studied? Is there empirical evidence? What's the correlation?
You know, I never like to say I don't know. I will say it is understudied because the question needs to be asked because unexpected pregnancy is more common outside of marriage than within it. But are there statistical differences in how couples react as a married couple if that does occur than outside? And I don't know of any numerical study. So you'd have to go on basis of what you think the hypothesis is. Having said that, there are some really interesting things that are happening. I think it's been a steady 70 to 80% of all abortions occur among single women. And it relates back to the lack of marital, relational, or emotional support from the immediate family or the partner. But over the last 10 years, what we found is that teenagers' participation in abortion is plunging. And a lot of it's for very good reasons. They're not having sex as early with the same number of partners during the early days of the sexual revolution, or they're delaying it. Where abortions are happening now is in the 20 to 29 and up into the early mid-30s range. This is the range where in previous generations, women, the vast majority, would have found a husband, and vice versa. So I think what we are finding is that the erosion of marriage is one of the dominant factors in the fact that abortions are remaining near 1 million a year. But again, this kind of really empirical study you want to do, I'm not sure it's been done. But I think you're right. It's a big factor.
This is really good, and the information is just it's overwhelming, yet it's powerful. And being a leader in a community that's predominantly black and Hispanic, schools where there's not a whole lot of education and resources available, how can I receive this material, this information, to go into those schools, those college campuses in our areas, to bring this information to those students and children? I mean, is it being silenced to where we can't go into the schools to bring this as leaders and clergy, or is it something that we can knock on the doors, we go to information, we have this right to do this? Because it's, they say ignorant is bliss, because I've never heard of pregnancy care centers, and I'm 40-something years old, and this is the first that I've ever heard in amongst leaders of faith. And I've been in institutions of faith for basically all my life. And I've heard of Planned Parenthood continually, but never, ever have I heard of what I'm hearing right now. So I thank God for you, because I'm also angry too because of this, and I would like to know, how can we start this movement of pro-life at the spiritual level, the religious level, leaders coming together, getting with their community. Like, can I go into my state representative office and say, listen, I need to go into some schools? No, am I going to be silenced because of that? Is it a taboo where we can't do this? No, if you could address that, I appreciate it.
Man, I feel like saying sorry to you. I don't know. Yeah, I really am sorry. But that information has never gotten to you.
Yeah,
and
it's on us.
This is one of the real reasons why we wanted to do this network. But yes, sir.
Well, it's hard to give you a blanket answer. Bishop was talking earlier about California. California has very strict things about what can be presented in schools, and it's hard for a pro-life abstinence message to get in. But that's not true everywhere. Philadelphia? Probably not easy. In most places, groups have tried to develop abstinence and other programs that don't make a religious argument. We talked about how do you deal with an atheist. In some ways, the government can be atheist or neutral. So you can't make necessarily the best religious argument you want to make on top of the health ones. But there are some very good abstinence curricula out there that you can get. The great thing is they're almost all free. Heartbeat International materials are free. Our studies are free. So we'll flood you if you ask for material, but it's going to depend on your local government.
And we're going to try to help you get a lot of information. Let me just help you understand. We're not going to be here all night. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 right now. And I know you're getting there. I know Reverend Kraft was over there too. So I'm just letting you know. So this is good. Y'all want to say that?
Absolutely. I'm so glad I got the mic. I got to stand up. To Star's point, that's the first point I want to talk about. Blacks not involved in pro-life. Sometimes we think pro-life is white, and pro-life is not white. If anybody needs to be pro-life, it's black people, because we done been through and we still have life. I'm boots on the ground as well, my sister. I'm an advocate on the sidewalk. I talk to women, men. I pray, preach, sing, whatever it takes to try and save that baby. My church is very active. We have more of us out there. The Catholics are out there. To God be the glory, because they shut down more abortion clinics than anybody has. The evangelicals are out there, and we are out there. We have to represent. Church people at that. Christians have to represent, especially black people. If anybody's going to bring abortion down, it is black people. Because abortion is racism. It is racism. That is the foundation of its principles. That is how it came about. And eugenics and all of that is alive and well. Sterilization. The history is what we need to tell. We need to talk about where this thing came from. It came from the pits of hell. And it has ravished our people, and it has done what slavery didn't do, what Jim Crow didn't do, what discrimination didn't do. It has done all of that. It has killed us. So we need to be in this. We need to be. Black people are needed everywhere. I worked in a pregnancy center, and that wasn't for me. Boots on the ground is for me, because I like to fight. All right. So number 2, Molech. That's what this is. Walking children through the fire. It's just modern day abortion turned around. It is Molech. And we've got to say no more to Molech. And we as a people, you would think that, like he said, teenagers are on the decline. I see married people going to get an abortion, kids in the background, kids in the car. And they can't take the kids into the abortion clinic because the kids are alive, right? So it's people with BMWs driving in. It's convenience. We are sexing ourselves to death. That's what we're doing. And I applaud all pastors. Our church has a pregnancy center. We're a community spot. So women come to our church where we have sonograms and STD testing, and we can get the resources to them. But when I go around the country talking to women about abortion, I have to face backlash, because I know that even in this room, there's somebody that has had one. Pastors' daughters, first ladies, evangelists, missionaries, and the like have had abortions. And we have to be sensitive to them. But at the same time, those are the perfect ones. Those are the warriors for Christ that will help us save the next baby. and they need to know how important and that the church will embrace them long. It's time out for not embracing our post-abortive sisters. They did wrong. They know they did wrong, because anybody who has killed their own child knows it. It's in the inside, and they have to be delivered, set free. Amen. And then I just wanted to say, in the children, I got a whole, so I've been waiting for the mic all night. But we are terrible with discipleship, and we have to, the young lady said that they disciple all the babies that, you know, I try and keep a picture. I'm just one person, but we have to come together as a group to disciple women. The Lord has given me the spirit of motherhood. I am adopted. I was unwanted. I have adopted 2 children that I love to life. And we are a community that has adopted. It's spiritual. Adoption is spiritual. It is also cultural to us. We have done this over the years without any paperwork, without any, you know, government intervention. We have adopted. But I am going to say that this, you know, God will forgive you, and so will the saints. But the state won't forgive you. So if you got anything on your record, you can't adopt. Also, HBCUs and colleges are guilty of indoctrinating our children with liberalism, with feminism, and with all the points that they, the autonomy and the reproductive justice and all those issues. We have to definitely, our college-age students are the ones that we have to really rein in. And one more point. Yes, I'm sorry. This is my passion. To reduce population, abortion must be instituted. This is not just the United States issue, even though we're in the United States. This is a global issue. It is reducing people that are of the darker hue. It is reducing the tan, the caramel, the chocolate. This is an assault on people of color. So we have to have the history, we have to have the compassion and the love to further our agenda.
Now, because Ms. Leslie Monet went through 9 points, and which were all very good, by the way, I'm going to just tell everybody we have to be out of this room soon. So your question, which is only going to be about 3 of them left, if that. I got Bishop Shines that I know is on, and Reverend Kraft, and I know I got a couple of people, and I got my man down here who has not talked at all tonight, and I know I have Reverend Hill. So, hear me. I need you already had a question. Sorry. Nope. No more comments. These are only quick questions, and I'm going to let you fire the question, not preference who you are. Fire the question off, give me the mic back. Fire the question off, give me the mic back. And we're going to let them handle 2 at a time. Thank you.
I was going to, the young lady just spoke so much about it. Let me pass the mic, please.
Good to go. Thank you. No, that's all right. Oh, yeah. Yes, we'll definitely do that.
Okay, I'm just going to keep this quick, and I had a couple, but I'm just going to leave it at this. And this one thing is that this whole discussion was illuminating the problem, and I would like to see what would be the solution as it relates to perhaps the reform of the public aid system. How can we fund, or how can we get support? Just like this young lady was saying, that they had different things that will to support the ladies by whether there's a policy that is going to be presented to present legislation in order to help this effort.
All right, 1 second. They're going to answer that one. Y'all holding that thought, right? Can I have him, because I know you were there?
Yes, wanted to comment, but I'll ask a question.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. We're talking about it from a couple of different points of view. We're trying to influence unbelievers through intervention, meeting them on the sidewalk. We're trying to present logical reasons for them to refrain from having abortions. But from a church point of view, and as we're pastors, how important is it that we just get back to the very principles of salvation and righteousness and preaching a conviction that will cause people, and that which really engages the culture when we do it beyond our pulpit, like from television and so forth. How important is it we stop sermonizing on how to get what you want and how God can bless you to achieve and to receive, and talk about the values that we all hold so dear. Is the pastor's role not to just make this a add-on to our sermon, but make this the very cause for which we go? How important is that?
As we're coming up, I'm going to let her answer this one. I'm going to answer pastors right here, because it's not a one or the other, it's a both and it has to be integrated in your lifestyle and everything you do. Who you are has to be about life. So I know there are different ways to go about getting your information out, but I'm telling you, you cannot get this information out if it's not who you are. And so it becomes something that you got to do, and you don't have to do this, because I never came into, quote unquote, the pro-life movement. I was pro-life because I was alive. So there was never a defining moment that way. When they asked me that kind of stuff, never did that. Wasn't an issue. I was raised in a Democrat family, all that kind of stuff. This is not about politics. This is about the fundamental value of life and what Scripture says. If you want to redefine it, that's on your deal. But I don't have the pay grade to redefine what life means, and that's Scripture. To answer his question. Anyone?
Focus me on it again. It was basically how.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I think there are a whole lot of pieces to the puzzle.
Can you address really quick?
I think there are a number of public programs that can help and do help, and that we need to continue to agree upon. I think programs like WIC, the ones that meet emergency needs, need to be there. Agencies, and this failed under the Bush administration. I don't know it's going to be revived because we have this big fight about religious liberty now. But there was an effort to allow religious agencies to receive public funds and do their missions, even if they use their own money to talk about the gospel. We still don't have that right. But there are a whole lot of people who have gifts in the church who want to go into that, nurses, counselors, and all, help with employment, whatever their skills are. But they've been told if you're in a government program, don't mention religion. That's not America. So we still have to solve that one, because otherwise people will feel their government's a little antagonistic to them. On health insurance, I happen to think that there are different ways programs could work, but every woman should have access to health insurance that does not cover abortion. I think it would be better if we had more options to choose from, because not everybody needs the same kind of health care at the same age, and the government's now trying to tell everybody you have to cover abortion drugs, which is driving people out of the market. But every woman shouldn't have to doubt whether there's coverage enough. But it's going to come down to the relational thing. If the people around you, beginning with the boyfriend and the family and your own family, are telling you, you can't do this, if your government says you're overpopulating the earth, the local newspaper says this is a welfare issue, we don't need to spend the money on you, all you hear is negative. And we got to turn around the negativity from every quarter it can come from. God doesn't send life into the world to be trampled upon. That was Abraham Lincoln's line, that nothing made, as he said, and stamped with the image of God was sent into the world to be trampled on.
Thanks.
That was his perspective, needs to be ours.
Yeah, that's good. Pastor Moss, I'm not giving the mic up no more.
I won't be obedient. There's women that die of abortion. Lakeisha Wilson died in Cleveland and Akron in March 2014, African American. In abortion clinics, because of the HIPAA laws, even this year, I'm sure there's a woman who have died of abortion. How can we I get my information from Operation Rescue, but is there other ways to get this information to the public about these women being maimed and women dying from abortionists?
That might.
Do you know, in my previous life in the pro-life movement, I used to talk a lot about how if those women had died in any other way other than in an abortion clinic, they'd be household names, there'd be marches, their faces would be on posters, and I do think that we need, as a pro-life community, we need to remember them, and we need to keep bringing up their names and holding the people responsible for their deaths accountable.
Go ahead, John, if you had a response.
Well, I was going to add at the policy level, believe it or not, our government, when they tally maternal mortality statistics, they generally can't get at those that are caused by abortion unless the abortion is linked to the event. Now, in the case in Ohio, it was clear the abortion event was linked to her death. But let's suppose you take the chemical abortion pill and you have hemorrhage, and in some cases you will die from the hemorrhage if it's not identified. Or let's say you have an ectopic pregnancy that the abortion clinic treated as a reason to do an abortion. You can get a death from that, but those are not going to be picked up. So Operation Rescue does a good job with what they see, but we need government agencies. We are campaigning to agencies related to my colleague here to revise the way they track maternal mortality. It's one of the big things we're doing, but we need to get the truth out. You're right.
I wanted to quickly let Charmaine just tell you quickly what she does in her role at HHS, and you can say that.
I'm in public affairs, and HHS, a lot of people don't know, it is the single largest federal agency in the government. We have a $1.2 trillion budget, bigger than the entire country of Great Britain. And it includes the CDC, the FDA, the NIH, all kinds of, you know, I told them I need a little book with all the acronyms. So it's a lot of fun, and but the really interesting thing about HHS is that it touches pretty much everybody's life every day in some way across the country. One of the things that we've been doing for the last three weeks, I guess now, is just unprecedented to have 3 Category 5 hurricanes hit the country right in a row, and so that's the Public Health Service is part of HHS, and I actually was just down in the Keys last week seeing, the Public Health Service has these pop-up hospitals with 250 beds in them. They can put them up in 3 hours. And we had, I think, something like 13 of them down in Florida. So really, really an eye on Puerto Rico now. I think people are not paying as much attention with having a 3rd hurricane in a row. But God bless them. We got to keep the people of Puerto Rico in our prayers.
Well, I want to thank you all. I know Reverend Kraft will have to forgive me because I think he was the last one that I had on the list, but I want to thank you all for coming tonight.
If you have any questions, please contact the Cure's National Clergy Network office at 202-479-2873 or visit our website at urbancure.org.